This podcast includes explicit content. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Erstis podcast. I'm Lina Bembe, and today I actually wish I didn't have to come to work. I just wish today, honestly, that I just stay warm in bed, eating cake and watching films. If you live anywhere within the northern bit of this planet, you might relate to something commonly known as winter blues. When the cold days arrive and you have no one to warm you up, what do? That's right. What happens when you're just too sad to fuck? What happens when you are a sex worker and people tell you you are crazy for choosing this path? Or what even happens if you are a sex worker who struggle with their mental health? Today, we're gonna talk about all these topics. And as usual, the ladies are here. How are you all?
Hello, here's Paulita Papel.
Hello, it's Pandora.
Hi, Olivia.
The Erstis podcast.
First base. So ladies, winter holidays are coming. Are you excited?
Has everybody coupled up in time for winter?
Yeah.
So much pressure.
I did
Come
my
on.
homework.
Delicious, anxiety.
Oh, I did my homework.
Undesirable family, extended family.
Oh,
I
what are you
actually
girls
hate
gonna do for
Christmas.
Likewise, I'm not in a relationship this year to be able to bring a partner home and use them as a buffer to hide from my parents. So that's not great. I'm not looking forward to it.
What are you girls doing for Christmas?
Well, I had this potential Christmas plan of going back to Mexico and seeing my family and paying a very expensive plane ticket to be there for the holidays and just dealing with the anxiety of having to talk about my job because I'm still not out to my family. So I'm just really not comfortable with having everyone with lots of time to ask me about my job and what I do. So I'm no. So I'm just no, definitely not going to Mexico. And instead, I'm going to stay in Berlin and drop acid. What? Yeah,
That's a very non-traditional Christmas indeed.
Yeah, that's a
That
plan.
is not just we're actually going to do butternut squash lettuce instead of turkey. That's
Yeah, I trade the baby Jesus for lights and colors. And
Maybe you'll meet Jesus on your trip. You can ask him how he's doing.
yeah, to the trip to the toilet, maybe.
So, we finally have a sponsor. And this is none other than Erstis. That's right, the Erstis podcast sponsored by Erstis. Who would have thought it? This means if you want to see what our day job looks like, then head to erstis-podcast.com/Erstis. That's ERSTIES. Check out the video and follow the link and you'll receive 50% off your first month. Please note that the content is 18+. One last time, erstis-podcast.com/Erstis. Click the link, 50% off your first month. And you must be over 18. Now, back to the pot.
So what are the rest of you doing?
I will go to Italy with a new lover.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Holidays or family?
I think it's the Italian affair. I think we're going to be meeting the family, which puts a little bit of pressure on for me. I don't know how he feels. We haven't communicated that yet because we're awkward. But
Does it make it official?
yeah, exactly. It doesn't make it official. Why are you asking me these questions? It's giving me anxiety.
That's what everybody's thinking.
And that's what I'm like, it doesn't make it official. What if I can have a emotional connection with the family? Is that going to make me feel bad if I don't want it to be official? And then also
Just
like,
get drunk.
or am I just a buffer? Like exactly what you were saying before, Olivia. Like, am I just a buffer so no one asks you questions about your life and everything? which I don't mind. But that's a lot of emotional labor,
It is. Oh my God, it's such a... I mean, it's, like, that's so good for someone to bring someone home, right? And it just makes everything so normal and happy. I've never actually been to anyone's family during Christmas or any other kind of holiday, and I've never brought someone to my family. I wouldn't put anyone through that.
Yeah, I think like all families have their own issues, their own dramas, like unsolved problems, whatever. So I think like sometimes you just have enough with your own family.
Yeah. Mine is quite intense, actually. I mean, the funny thing is, like, looking backwards, it serves for a lot of funny anecdotes, if you know what I mean. Like, the junkie cousin and the crazy grandmother. And it just serves for quite funny stories, like, once you've been through them.
Retrospectively,
it's actually funny. When you're there, you just want to die, but,
and drink some wine, like, through the whole thing.
Once you get over them, you might want to share them more.
Yeah, a good place that you can actually share your wild stories that I know you have plenty of, Paulita. I've been listening to this podcast recently called Risk, where people tell true stories they never thought they would share in public. I mean, unless you're like us, which is just like the normal everyday activity. And they've had people like Margaret Cho, Mark Moron, Sarah Silverman on there, so it's really worth a listen.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so you can find it by just searching Risk on iTunes, and you can also follow them on Twitter at Risk Show.
Ooh,
Will they take us in?
Yeah? Shall we ask to be on their show?
I have a couple of fun stories to share.
I
guess
bet
I'm
you
on that
do.
level, right, Margaret Cho?
Yeah, I'd say that you've got a lot in common. Basically the same.
I feel that way. I feel like we're twin sisters.
Winter solstice is a very intense time of the year.
You know what can be a useful coping mechanism when you're just sat there and everyone's pouring wine and cutting the turkey and you're just like, I'm really not into this? The useful thing about being in your childhood home is you can just up and take yourself off to your bedroom and just bash one out. Just do a bit of nostalgic masturbating in your childhood room. Do you guys find that?
Or watching your Backstreet Boys
poster. The cushion you first humped during your days of early discovery.
It probably has a name. What's the name of your cushions?
My cushion.
cushion.
No, it
your
changed
cushion.
all my crushes, It was, and then I had many cushions, so we were in an open relationship in my bed,
But I'm a little bit worried this year that I'm not going to be able to use that as a coping mechanism because I've been feeling quite depressed recently, and I've actually found that my sex drive has gone right down. Like, I don't even really feel that much of an urge to masturbate anymore, which is quite unusual for me.
It's very hard. I had two partners that I dated previously, and when they were going through some mental health issues, they would stop showing me any affection or any intimacy, and like it could last up to 2 or 3 months. And then I have to deal with their stuff, and then I have to deal with my stuff, which means that I'm feeling rejected, I don't feel good, I don't feel sexy, so I'm really sorry you're going through that, babe.
That can be very challenging, dealing with your partner's, mental health problems, just because there's so much. I think since we live in this society where, like, as a partner, you expect to be responsible for your partner's mental well-being or general well-being, both like sexually, emotionally, mentally, and that can be just a lot, I've had experiences with partners dealing with mental illnesses, and I think it's very important, as you're saying, Pandora, to also look at your own boundaries. Like, there's only that much you can do. You're not their therapist, right? What has helped me actually was, first of all, to inform myself and feel like I read and I try to understand what my partners are going through, so I can, again, like, try to understand that, their issues have nothing to do with me, and try to not take it personally when they're having, whatever they're going through. And another thing that might help is also going to therapy together, or, apart from maybe your partners going to therapy for themselves, but actually someone professional to help you deal with the consequences that issue is having in your relationship.
Yeah. Even like the therapy bit, it's so tricky. For example, in my case, like right now I'm feeling good, better right now, but a few years ago I was I was struggling with depression. And I had this therapist that I went to for over the span of maybe 2 or 3 years or so. And during those times, I wasn't doing any sort of porn and so. My life was like really different, very, very different. And I think it was like mostly affected by how I was feeling about myself, because in my case, I was just like barely functioning, like the typical thing that right now you see a lot in memes, and you see like very likely like, oh, what did you do this year? It was like just, I survived, you know? I was pretty much in that mode. And one of the things that, and over the time I got better and so, and it was like kind of like this sort of like funny coincidence that the moment I started feeling better about myself, it was like also like the moment I decided to get into porn. And when I was like talking about it with my therapist, there was finally like this session. And in the beginning, I wasn't like telling him right away, hey, I'm thinking about getting into porn. I just like completely hid it from him. And then at some point, it was the day in which, okay, yeah, it's time to come out to your therapist. So I came out to my therapist and told him, hey, you know what? I've just like started doing porn. And you know what he said?
What?
Nothing. He was just like started staring at me like, seriously, I think for like 10 seconds, like the eyes wide open, just like,
Oh gosh.
yes, yeah. So, and it was really funny because after that, a couple of sessions later and so on, we kind of like talk about my progress and stuff. And he told me, well, you know, I think that you're like doing much better now and so on. I see that you are progressing and stuff. But I think it will be worth continuing the sessions now that you started doing porn. So I was like, okay, so...
As in that is a new problem? Or?
Yeah, as that is something that needs to be analyzed and worked over.
Okay.
So
Kind of seeing it in the category of like you've just decided to start drinking a bottle of whiskey every day or something like that.
Something like, what the hell got into your mind? Like,
Yeah, this is evidence of your pathology.
This is not gonna fix you.
totally. And yeah, I think after that, I just had like 2 more sessions, and then I just was like, bye. Like, I just like stopped going there. And yeah, I don't miss him, I have to say.
Well done there.
Now we jump into our main course. When we're feeling blue, it's easy to feel lonely and isolated. But when you are a sex worker, the feeling of isolation and having few or no people at all or resources to turn to becomes double.
At the beginning of 2018, it hit the headlines that 5 porn performers lost their lives within 3 months. This drew public attention and obviously created lots of scandal. It was beginning to sound like being a porn performer is really bad for your mental health indeed.
Wait, didn't Shyla Styles just like died in her sleep?
Yes.
And Olivia Nova died from a urine infection. But the headlines read, porn star Olivia Nova lay dead and half naked for 12 hours after dying. She had a UTI.
That's horrible.
But of course they had to stress the fact that she was a porn star and that she was half naked, as if it was any relevant.
And then Olivia Liu had overdosed with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, I think Yuri Love was in an overdose as well. She was found dead in her bed.
And then there's like August Ames, the popular porn star that took her own life, finding herself in the middle of a controversy over cyberbullying and homophobia. She was really open about dealing with depression and bipolar and was struggling to find a sex work conscious therapist.
And yet the headlines read, 5 porn performers dead within 3 months. They seem to miss out a lot of the details here and just make an explicit connection with being in porn and dying. As you were saying, with August Ames, it sounds like her death could have been connected to a number of things. She was suffering from mental health problems and unable to find a suitable therapist, and in the middle of a cyberbullying controversy as well. So she must have been extremely isolated. I was wondering if you ladies think that the isolation from being a sex worker is perhaps more connected to the mental health problems than the work itself.
Absolutely. I believe that stigma and the fact that you cannot talk openly about it, that it's hard to reach out to people when you're feeling bad because you cannot be open about what you're doing, that plays obviously a lot in your mental health well-being. It's just so stressful to have to hide a part of yourself, and it creates a lot of shame and bad thoughts that can bring you into a spiral of bad feelings. I think that's why community is so important.
Yeah, I mean, if you link sort of mental health to any sort of form of marginalized identity, then of course like the risks are higher. But that doesn't mean that that condition as such will cause mental health.
Yeah, and yet it seems to be in society that we still spread this kind of myth that, sex work, that means you're damaged, that means you have mental. It's because of the work that you're doing. And I think that lots of the people that have that information, they get it from studies that, as you were saying, only look at these more marginalized communities. They're looking at street workers, undocumented migrants, low-income workers, and it seems to be a tidier narrative to blame it on the sex work than to look at the systems of oppression and underprivilege that they're living within. Actually, when they do studies in places where sex work is partially legalized and the industry is more accessible, they find that aspects like personal safety, less harassment by authorities, and having autonomy over your work are bigger contributing factors to having good mental health, which something like with Sesta Foster losing platforms like Backpage, obviously that's going to have a major impact on sex workers.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so hypocritical, this whole Sesta Fosta discourse about, fighting trafficking or protecting women. Yeah. It's just big bullshit, because what they're doing... No, but actually it's like they're taking away the platforms that are actually providing for safer working conditions, which is so detrimental for the general health of any sex worker.
Totally.
It's making sex workers more marginalized, even more.
Yeah,
put them in a corner.
Totally.
Take away their livelihood.
Exactly. And what plays into like having good mental health in a big way is like financial security.
Absolutely. That's why we work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that it's a similar stigma, or a stigma that has a similar narrative towards sex workers and towards people with mental illnesses that is invalidating your life choices, right? So you're sick in your head, right? So whatever you decide for yourself, it's wrong. You're not in a position to have agency over your life. And same thing as a sex worker, you're victimized, and whatever life choices you're making, you're not in a good place to make them, so someone else should decide for you. It's a discourse that is trying to make the same thing, which is putting people in an even worse position than they are.
Yeah,
it's totally absurd.
And even like funny, because even sometimes people just, if someone is a sex worker, they just assume that you chose sex work because you're crazy. I mean, like put in this really like awful like ableist words. It's like because you're crazy, or because you automatically are traumatized. You automatically, I mean, there's something that happened in your childhood. There's something that it's like not, that it's grown in your brain, whatever. And it's just like, I don't know, like, again, if it's not about just, first of all, being a sex worker doesn't automatically mean that you have mental health issues. That's like the first thing people need to understand.
Yeah, let's agree on that.
Yes.
Actually, I think it's quite interesting that for a lot of people, sex work has actually helped them to cope with their mental health problems. So, say, because it is such a taboo topic and so on, actually taking agency over your body and deciding to practice such work can be empowering. And it can potentially provide an avenue to function and heal and feel better about ourselves when we can't succeed in traditional career paths that demand other, commitments that maybe we cannot commit to due to our mental health problems. So actually the reality is that choosing sex work as a career can be a very positive decision for someone having mental health issues, and not at all detrimental to her or them, but actually in the country be a positive path for change and improvement.
I think that I will be one of the persons who pretty much relate to this. And I don't know, before doing porn, I was just like doing some jobs that were like kind of like fancy titles, whatever. But I was just like not happy. I just had like zero motivation. I was just like, oh my God, I'm just doing this, but I don't know where the hell I'm going. And I think that for me, it also got to a point in which I couldn't just like escape that situation. And I was just like feeling like shit because I didn't know what I could do for myself, or what could like be like good at, that I also make me feel like that I was growing with it, or that I was like proud about it, about myself. And I think it was like precisely like partially like those kind of feelings that just like at some point just made me feel like plain sad, and at some point just made me feel like completely depressed. And there were days in which I was just like, okay, I just need to do this, and then I will just like be fine in terms of like functioning, like the basic stuff, like, okay, like get up, it's been 3 days without a shower, okay, I need to shower. Go to university, I was studying at the time, okay, just like go and do it. And then, but for the rest, it was just like, I just was like feeling like really like sad inside, and really like unmotivated, and really just like, there was like just something like not normal about me, where I was just like not fitting, not happy. And I don't know, it's really paradoxical, because then when I just like decided to do porn, like, I don't know, it was just like something about it that was like, okay, like this actually feels right. And then when I like started just like following the path and just like getting into it a little bit more, then it was just really funny, because precisely all like those feelings of like hopelessness, or like lack of direction, or of like just like went away, really went away. And I think that at this point I can say that pretty much like choosing porn and sex work and preferring to cope with the problems of like sex work, and preferring to face not to have some like respectable job, and preferring to face the fact that that to the eyes of many people I just like wasted my opportunities, whatever. I totally prefer that path, at the cost of like being true to myself.
I love that. You're so, with Christmas, you do whatever the fuck you want. With your life, you do whatever the fuck you want. Like, this is good. That's so great.
Oh, well, I'm just trying. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, it's also like the burden of having to face what many other sex workers face, which is like marginalization, which is like bullying, which is having to protect yourself and your privacy at all costs, and which is also like the uncertainty of what are you gonna do with your career, and when, I don't know, like in the future years, what are you gonna do about it? So it's like, I don't know, it's just like having to balance things. But I think that on like this sort of like very important emotional level, and for the way that I used to feel in the past, I could totally say that pretty much like sex work saved me from just feeling shit and hopeless.
I can relate to it so much. I've never been as miserable as when I was working in academia. Like, I mean, all those photocopies, man. The smell of a photocopy machine makes me feel like it's absolutely makes me feel nauseous. And yeah, I agree. I think, so there's the fact of like being a sex worker, you have to hide what you're doing, but having a vocational impulse to be a sex worker and having to hide that, being in a normal in quotation marks, job it's worse. I felt like everything that I was doing, I can relate to you, Lina, because I also was very privileged. I had access to a lot of resources and like possible, job careers, and I just felt miserable because I felt I was not being true to myself, and I could not fully show myself and explore.
I think that this is a narrative in society that we need to change, full stop. This idea that you keep climbing the ladder and then you get the career of your dreams, and that automatically means that you'll be happy. And people get to that point and that's just not the case. And they're confused because they have no other options. They didn't ever think about anything else. And this is why, that comes up at Christmas. Obviously, there's the anxiety because you're going to be talking to family members and they're going to say, oh, what are you doing with your life? How's it going? And that's seen as a shortcut to understanding if things are good, if it's good.
And anyway, I think there's also, we're talking about this from like very personal experience, and of course, like acknowledging the sort of privilege that we have access to. But assuming that sex work is not monolithic, and there's people from all backgrounds and lots of identities. If we had to talk about even more like people with more like marginalized identities, some from more like marginalized class conditions, in many ways, like sex work can even be a more safe job than going from a traditional, through a more like traditional sort of like jobs. I mean, like a working class job when you perhaps you're like still like overworked, exploited, where your like co-workers or your boss might like harass you and so on, when you get like a very shitty wage. And I mean, how can that not be stressful? How can that not take a toll on your mental health? So, I mean, it's completely legitimate to choose sex work over a shitty, marginalizing job for your mental health and for your living conditions and the people who might depend on you. So, to sum up, I think that if we all humanize the role and lives of sex workers and the fact that mental health is nothing to be ashamed of to shame other people, our societies will be far more accepting and open to understand the positive impact sex workers could have in our lives, and in what ways could their work help us get through the bad days. Isn't that mind-blowing? Like, it's not only about like, okay, yeah, forget about the stigma, no, man. Like, sex workers can actually help you, normal person, wherever you are, to cope with your winter blues, with your trauma, with your shame, with whatever your stupid mental therapist cannot solve for you. Boom. Are your minds blown? Like, welcome in! Drum roll! Next level. Totally. So for this episode, we have a very, very special guest. Who will that be? No one else but a fellow sex worker. Her name is Marlen, and she's gonna talk to us about her work, her practice, and the role of sex workers with coping with healing and trauma besides only the sexy bits of the job. Hello, Marlen. Thank you for coming today.
Hi. Nice to be here. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Yes,
Thank you.
we're happy to have you here. Could you just please introduce yourself? What do you do?
I'm Kristina Marlen. I'm a sex worker based in Berlin, and I work with a fusion of several techniques, I would say. So it's all based on the tantric ritual of touch. I explored a lot on the boundaries of the tantric ritual, which is very rigid in its roles. So my clients can also touch me, or I can go more interactive. And also I included the elements of BDSM into it, which is very important for me because I truly love it. And I'm a bondage expert, so that means I'm tying up people, letting them hang from the ceiling. And yeah, that's very much fun.
How would you describe, for example, like a ritual? If I went to you and I asked for your services and asked you for a ritual, how would it evolve? Like,
I mean, it totally depends on what you want, like what your intention is. I think this is very significant for every ritual. I mean, just from the structure of it, it means, or what I appreciate is that it means really a conscious step out of your everyday mindset, like my everyday life, and means like I'm focusing now on something else, which is in this case your sexual desires, or a play, or maybe another intention is like I want to go back to a certain feeling that I once had, and I had this experience, and I want to have it again, but I want to have it different. This can be an intention as well. So there are many ways of having rituals. Like if you ask shamans, like they have even more, but in my case, yeah.
And do you have like common like intentions? So people come like with like very I don't know if there's like a sort of intention or need that people come to you specifically that kind of like repeats itself a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if they come to me, of course, they have read my website. And as I'm so specialized, for example, in this like mixture from bondage and bodywork, this is very appealing for a lot of people. Just this power of restriction and being bound, being held at the same time. This is very attractive for many people, no matter which gender, I would say. And also that I combine this, like my style of domination is, I call it sensual domination, because I do not see a reason why I should be distant all the time if I'm dominating someone. I mean, this is the best, it's the best part that I can be, like I can really be close if I'm the one leading the thing, and I enjoy this a lot. So I think this is also not very common, as a lot of mistresses are very much like, oh, go on your knees, like this kind of stuff. And if you like this, it's fine. But for some people, it's too hard. And they really like powerful women or like being dominated, but they don't want to be humiliated or have really strong pain or something like this. And that I do this mixture is very appealing.
There seems to be a lot of emotional work in it.
Probably, yeah. That's true. It's really true. Yeah. Because I'm really like, of course I'm going for. I see myself as someone who's like dedicated for lust, like and pleasure. But still, I always see the whole person and have to see where they. Like, what is it? Like, what do they want to experience? And the sexuality is so much linked to deeper parts of our personalities, which are maybe hidden or forbidden, or like have other kinds of like being locked in. So it's a kind of release work sometimes. Because it's not my role to heal someone. It's more like my role to facilitate a space where someone can make a new experience, which is truly healing. I think healing is not something which comes from outside. It's more something like you make the experience that you can guide your own, your own experience. Like you have more control. Maybe control is a bad word, but it's kind of, I have an influence on what is happening to me and the way how I experience it. And this is maybe the true difference to if something just happens to you. And this is mostly where kind of trauma happens. So I think, and that I can provide this space it's very big. But at the same time, it's in the best case, it's effortless. But this is it's a way to make it always effortless.
Nice. And how much do you have, like, do you talk to your clients? Is there in a session is there a lot of talking, or is like the sort of communication more like physical?
I talk beforehand a lot. Also, we have email contact, so I have an idea of someone is really also if they are right with me. Like sometimes people write me and I feel like, okay, this is okay that you have this request, but I send you to someone else because they are really better in what you're searching for. So I find out if these clients are really for me. So I talk a lot about desires, wishes, but also boundaries. And I always set up a communication system that we use during the session, because things change all the time and also boundaries change. I love that fact. And I also, I mean, this is part of the work that people feel like, I had this thing always, there was a blockage or like, and now I can go there and it's no pain in the ass. It's like truly beautiful. And this, but we have to kind of make sure that throughout the session, we are fine and we are in contact. And so this is part of the verbal. And mostly my sessions are very non-verbal, as I'm a body worker. This is just my thing. So I can really feel someone, and if I'm not sure, like also the other way around, if people say like, oh, do whatever, or like I'm really easy here, and then I can feel like the body is not going there, of course I would ask them.
Would you agree that it's not that common for women to hire sex workers?
Absolutely. And
Yeah?
it's very sad. I mean, I had to really work on having female clients, and now I'm very happy because I have sometimes I have really 50% of female clients, but because I really worked since 4 years or more for it, and I have a special site on my website which is very present of like, this is my offer for women, and I do a lot in media, so I had interviews and talks about this because it's a special thing. The reason is, I think that sex work is mainly structured very patriarchally, sorry, for everyone here out there. English is not my mother tongue. So,
I love how sexy that sounded.
yeah, of course. And as I have really this vision of having a gender equal sex work, there's not just like having the fight for self-conducted sex workers who are happy to do what they do or like really okay with what they do. It's also the other way around. Like we need all genders as clients. So this is the utopia. And I'm straightforward on this path, but there's still a lot to do.
You were saying earlier that a sense of having control over or empowerment within sort of your desires, or maybe even experiencing like a release of blockages plays a big role in healing from trauma. Do you think even the process of like hiring a sex worker in the first place could like be part of that?
Absolutely. This is really, like, I get goosebumps when I just heard the question. Like, and this is totally what is at the moment happening. Or like, I have so many, especially female clients who have this experience of like, wow, I can go somewhere. I take it in my own hands, and like money is then the symbol. It's like, this is what I pay for myself, for this space, that someone's really there for my pleasure. This is like, wow. And they like, a lot of these people say that this is a very empowering experience just by itself. And then what happens within the session is also another, or like it's the second thing. So yes.
So it goes beyond the sexual gratification, will you say?
Yeah, I would say so, yes. Because sex is truly loaded by our power dynamics in society, and where we have sex and the way we have sex and under which circumstances is always political. And so this action of someone is like going for their own whatever, like exploration is a political thing. And so I can feel that. It's a political thing, but it's also like the individual, maybe that's what you wanted to say, like it's more than just sex, it's an emotional thing, yes.
I absolutely relate to it. The very first time I hired a sex worker, I think that was one of the most empowering experiences that I've ever had. Just the fact, actually, before even getting there, just the fact of me like booking myself an Airbnb room, hiring this sex worker, telling them what I want. It was just like, I can't even start expressing how empowering and how good it feels. And I would recommend to every woman
absolutely
to have at least once that experience. I think it really changes something. As you were saying, sex has so much to do with power dynamics, and it does click something in your brain, like something changes.
And also I think, because I don't want to go too strong in a kind of binary men and women discourse, which is the danger once you talk about it. But still we can say that like female with a star sexuality is so suppressed, and that people who have a female socialization are used to kind of capitalize their sexuality in so many ways, like not as sex workers, just that we get money for it, but in a kind of just social way, that it's very unusual to say like, well, now I will just get something. And I think it should be in all, like also intimate relationships, the case, but still there has to be a space which is independent from this. And man, like people who have more male socialization, For them, it's really totally. There's no question about it. Like the infrastructure, how men use sex workers offers is so like, it's just there. Like, I don't know how they talk about it. Like if fathers talk to their sons or like, but they just think about like, which time could I make free and blah, blah, blah. And then after I go to this meeting and like, there's not a big deal of this. And I've like, how comes this self-understanding and why do we not have it? It's amazing.
Do you think that it would be easier for women to conceive of it if they thought of it more in a category of like self-care and wellness, or do you think it's important that they are sort of thinking it still in terms of very much like sex work and they're paying a sex worker?
Yeah, I see the thing, like funny wise, I'm asked this a lot. And like, if it's more wellness for women, and I really hate this question because why desexualizing this again? Like, because female sexuality was always like more like a lesbian sexuality is seen as a kind of special hygiene between women or something. Like, what should they do if there's no penis involved? and so this I don't. It's like, can't you see it like you're going to the hairdresser? And I'm like, no, no, please, can you just really appreciate your sexuality? It's really a thing. Also for women, like why
honor
not?
it instead of
It will kind of like reinforce the idea of like the soft gaze and the light touch, and so that it needs to be super delicate, where you can be just like filthy and dark and more hardcore.
I think women are sort of in the habit of hiding their rituals a bit, aren't they? They're like, oh, we're going to go to the nail salon, and then they like tell all their secrets, and it's not about the nails at all.
Do you often have clients who express openly that they do have either certain traumas or certain like issues about their own sexuality that they're like shameful about, and they want to work them through with you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, BDSM, just the whole field of BDSM is so full of shame and misconception, as you call it. And people who have these desires are like, have sometimes a very long biography of like hiding it, being shameful for it, not being open in their relationship about it. So this is truly a burden for them. And so the session can be just a way to make it true is already healing, I would say. Yeah. Yeah, if people say that they come with a trauma, I think trauma is even a different thing. Then I'm very careful, because I know, and I tell them also, I'm not a therapist. I mean, I'm a physiotherapist, but it's a different thing. So I'm not a therapist. I tell them what I can do. Like, I can lead you through this experience, and I'm very, very aware of our communication, and you can like... maybe telling once more than usually, that they can tell at any time if something's not right, or I would ask another time more than usually if they are okay. But mostly this is enough. Like, mostly this is enough to, as I said, like provide a healing space.
Nice. And do you have like any sort of I would say, because if you work with something that is traumatic, you might need more than one session. Or do you need to...
Yeah, I mean, if someone has just one session, this cannot be the thing. Of course, like, this is always a path in whichever way, if it's therapeutic or with yourself. But this can, like, a lot of my sessions, and I came, like, I'm so amazed by the feedbacks that I receive afterwards, because it seems like just one situation can be a, like, door opener for a whole new thing, or like a new phase in the life or something, like opening something's like, now I was reminded of something that I really was like had lost, or now I can, like, people came back, it's like, after I was in your session, I had the first time sex with my partner since like I don't know how many years, and then we had a long talk about our sexuality, which was so due, like things like this, or they found something in themselves, and so they're kind of key moments maybe that that are important.
So do you work with couples often? And what is that like?
Yeah, that's because I'm just one person. We have to check out what we are going to do. And sometimes what is very, very cute is if one person is giving me as a present to the other, and they are maybe in space and they witness, but it's just like they give it as a present. This is oh my god, so heartbreaking.
Mental note, next Christmas present.
Holiday presents.
No, it's really, and also I experienced so many functional partnerships through my work, which is like, wow, they're really existing. Like people who are like 30 years together. It's like, what? And they also come to my workshops like, wow, and they are there and we are very, very lucky and happy, but we still want to like explore and enlarge our field of sexuality. So what can we do? It's like, wow. So if couples come, it's not so much about trauma. It's more about like learning, exploring, trying out new things. It's really, really fun.
Those are our relationship goals.
Absolutely. Hashtag that.
I was wondering if people ever say, you said about them opening new doors in their lives, how it impacts other aspects of life that aren't necessarily sexual, but that like are related to these blockages. Like if there's anything specific, like it's changed their careers, or because I think sometimes people think, oh, sex is only related to sex.
And no, I mean, I haven't heard that someone is really like having changed their career, but who knows? But yeah, like I felt like what I heard was people saying they were more self-confident or like more self-aware also, because sometimes it's like someone is getting in contact with some of their emotions since a long time, like first time since a long time. And so this makes a broader understanding of themselves. And so I think this is changing their way of also handling themselves, so to say, or like behave.
Moving through the world.
Yeah. Well, that bit that you mentioned before about empowerment, or like clients who are like have been socialized as female, that bit of empowerment and the political side of it already like speaks about not only what happens in the bedroom, but maybe some other aspects. Just feeling better maybe about yourself. Or
I think, we are talking so much about a culture of consent, and I find it truly important that we have this like, no is no, of course, if there's a no, please respect that. And I think we should, in the meantime, talk about like, what is the yes? Like people are very, like, I know that a lot of people are not aware of what they really want and enjoy. And as long as you cannot really articulate this part, consent, like it's just half the cup of consent if you talk about the boundaries. And I think a lot of people are truly not aware how they can get a connection to their body, and how they can communicate what they want with their partners or somewhere else. And sexual desires are so, like, there's still such a big taboo about talking about sex. And so this has to be changed. Like, we need spaces where we can explore ourselves and feel like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And so maybe next time I can address it actively and not just wait till someone comes and does it. It's and this is truly empowering. And I think this skill, to come back to this, helps you also in other parts of your life.
Nice. In general, how do you think that BDSM can help people to cope with trauma or emotional blockages?
That's a big one.
You've got 2 minutes. No, I'm joking.
I think no matter which practice you do, like, which might be in some, like, considered as something brutal or weird or whatever, I think the base of BDSM is trust. Like, this is the big thing. If you go really into BDSM, what you need is trust. And this can be healing. I cannot say more, I think.
Totally.
Makes sense.
Like, to let go. I have this experience all the time. Like, it doesn't matter if I can tie someone up or like giving them a great massage or whatever. My job is to make them trust in a very, very short period of time. And this is the key for everything what happens after. And I think this is the kind of bad, like physical bad also, but the bad on which the other things can happen. And if people make the experience that if they let go, that they can fall, and that there's something or someone is there, this is mostly mind-blowing.
It's beautiful. Yeah, totally.
I got goosebumps.
Yeah, that was really great. I was like, wow, it's so true.
And what do you enjoy the most about your work?
Yeah, I like the intimacy. I'm a totally physical person. Like, I need so much body contact. Like, one partner never could fill this desire. So that's why I'm a sex worker. So I just need a lot of skin on my skin. And I like to touch people. And I'm just like, I like the softness of bodies. And I like to just sink into body landscapes. And I think this is really the basic reason. And yeah, as I said, like, I like to beat someone up. I like to tie people. So this is really my kink to do that. So mostly I'm enjoying myself a lot during my sessions. And I like the psychological aspect of it, like going so deep into other people's souls. That's a thing.
Amazing.
I think on that note, from at the beginning you were saying of needing so much contact with other people's skin, and on your website as well, and at the beginning of the session you emphasised like how important touch is. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering from your experiences as a sex worker, if you feel like there's a general kind of touch deficit that people feel that are coming to you or in society in general.
Definitely. Like, I mean, people are like used to stroke the smartphone all the time, but no one is hugging each other anymore. You know,
yeah, do you think it's worse?
Yes. It sounds so old school what I just said, but it's true. Like, I mean, it's also, there's a taboo. Like, we like clap each other on the shoulder or like, you know, but like touching someone is such a big field. Like, I do sometimes workshops of 4 days where I can teach people how to use their own body for massage. Like, you can massage yourself while massaging someone, and people freak out about it. It's like you can really dive into body landscapes, as I just said, and it's so good. I think there are a lot of studies how touch changes our neurophysiology and how it makes us more intelligent and more empathic and everything. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm like, where can people book a session?
Do you do group deals?
For a fan? Just hypothetically.
Yeah. Could you give us the details of where people can find you, more information about you and your work and so?
Yeah, you can find me in the internet unter www.marlen.mi, like not D-E, M-I. And I'm on Facebook and social media, Kristina Marlen, with Kristina with a K.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was really inspiring.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Aftercare. So ladies, how do you feel now?
Really good.
Was it really uplifting, right?
I'm feeling really emotional, actually. I think I find it really, so liberating and freeing to have someone talk about these topics with such an ease and just making it normal and logical. It feels just like there's so many times that we cannot talk about these topics in usual conversations, and it just feels so liberating to be able to talk about it and also, hear it from an expert.
I think it was also quite empowering to understand that a sex worker can be there to sort of like help you to release those emotional blockages, and that there are other, you know, ways of channeling that, and it doesn't have to be just like going to therapy or working by yourself. You have these kind of more tender, more physical, immediate options, which I really like.
Yeah. She had a very simple answer for trying to fix trauma, which was like building trust again. And it's true, like if you're going to get suspended from the roof, you really need to trust that person that knows what they're doing, or you're going to fall on the floor. And again, trust is so important for all the relationships that you have with people, like your family and your friends, and also your partners or partner.
Yeah, I was really impressed by that situation when she was talking about like touch and so, and all the communication process going on. And I mean, of course, like being like communication is such a super important part of sex. I was just thinking, like, whenever you go to your therapist, you go and then you talk about, I don't know, all the stuff that's going on to you, and eventually it goes along the talks of like about sex or relationships, and so I don't know if always like talking about it could work. It's more like, I don't know, if you had like to do like some physical work, you know, on those issues that otherwise you will just talk to your therapist and maybe you will solve them. Or what if you just like, by getting the embrace of someone, or like someone else beating the shit out of you, you can just like work it even better than paying to a psychologist or whatever.
Yeah, I think especially if you've got these blockages or you're holding some trauma, there's a tendency to kind of separate your head from your body. And I do have that in therapy where she will sort of draw attention. She'll be like, oh, what's going on with your chest right now? And then as soon as you then send your mind to pay attention to that, you get emotional and it releases because you're aware of where you're holding the feeling, like in your body.
Absolutely, and I think it's a common experience, especially for people that have been socialized as women, to be dissociated from your body so often. And I think it's so important to regain your control over your body, and as you're saying, like feel what your body is feeling and be connected with yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really key for mental health.
So, okay, we need to check our calendars and book a session together.
Yes.
It'll be great.
Yes.
I'm so interested.
So, thank you all for being with us through this kind of like dark episode. I hope you survived it, and I hope it kind of like gave you hope to cope with this dark, cold, funny days. And if you still feel you need a friend, 4 friends you can talk to who are like as crazy as you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Wait, what
Don't group me into your stuff.
What do you mean crazy? Okay, do I sound crazy?
Do share your thoughts by leaving us a comment on Twitter at the Erstis Podcast, or check our brand new Instagram account at Erstis_podcast. As always, write us a review because we really do read and appreciate them all. And for more past and upcoming episodes and interviews, we super recommend you to subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever it is you listen to your podcasts, because we're always preparing fun stuff for you all.
Yes. Happy winter solstice.
Happy winter solstice. Bye.
The Erstis Podcast.